Hello and welcome everybody to the Living Water Podcast, where we continue the conversation about Jesus and helping you on your journey of finding and following him. I'm Xavier. This is Pastor Chase. We're here with another episode. This is episode 10.
10, man. This is double digits.
Double digits, and like I said earlier, not just like 10, but like 10 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
At least, I don't think we missed a week.
Consecutive. No, we had a couple of those, actually only one solo technically, because the week that I wasn't there, you had a guest, and we've had a couple guests now in addition. So double digits.
The episode with Kyle got like the most views other than our first episode.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
I love it. It was a great conversation. If you haven't listened to it, I mean, chances are, if you're watching this one, you have, just because you're following it at this level. But like, if you haven't listened to it, it's a great conversation. You guys are too, like, this is not to just like, make you feel, blow up your head. Mm-hmm. You guys are two incredible examples of like young men who love Jesus and who are truly trying to follow him in the call that he has in their life. And it just showed through that conversation, and it was cool. It was refreshing,
Yeah.
And you could tell you were even more comfortable.
I think so. Yeah. I'm starting to get in like a groove of interview type.
But even like with me, like, we're comfortable, but like you were at another level of comfortability with Kyle. Yeah, you could
tell. There might have been
some
of that. I don't know.
It was good.
We do hang out a lot.
Yeah.
But so do you and I. So
that's true. That's true.
Anyway, we had a very special Sunday, and like you said, you don't want to like oversaturate this like specialty aspect, but to an extent, it was almost more weighty than others, and I feel like even in worship, like I was on keys, but even in worship, it just felt kind of different. Like it felt like it was a really good atmosphere.
I mean, worship, it was awesome. It was one of those days like I genuinely not forgot where I was, but in a good way. I was experiencing God's presence in that time in a way where I kind of forgot to be the pastor. You know what I mean? Yeah. In a way that's a good way. Like I'm just worshiping him to worship him for me. And but you could feel it in the room too. Yeah. It was cool.
Yeah. So when you're playing an instrument, typically you'll have like headphones in, and then I took one out.
Yeah.
Just to like hear what was going on, and I heard people like screaming, and like I looked around and people were on their knees. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And it was cool because we were supposed to have a full band.
Yeah.
And we ended up not having a full band, and it was just two people singing, Kyle and Nicole, and then me on the piano.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it wasn't the expectation of like, okay, this is gonna be really cool. It actually almost felt like the opposite of like, we're like short-staffed a little bit.
Totally. Isn't that how the Lord, I mean, that's how he works sometimes too, Like
it was so dope.
Yeah, it was. It was a great day.
But part of the reason this Sunday was so special is because it was one of our Missional Impact Partnership Sundays.
Yeah.
How often do we do those? I actually don't know.
Yeah, I think part of what the goal is 3 or 4 a year, where we really highlight it and talk about missional impact in our missional impact partners and partnership opportunity. It's not, it's hard because growing up in the church, there was something called Mission Sunday, or in my Assemblies of God throwback upbringing, there was something like missionaries, faith promise. Yeah. People would donate a certain amount a month to help support missionaries, which is awesome. But I remember when that was happening, it was always kind of like it felt like a token Sunday, and then we wouldn't even think about it or talk about it again until the next one. And so I'm hesitant to just, emphasize the MIP Sunday itself because I don't want to cause that same thing in people. It's really something we're wanting to invite people into consistently, but we want to intentionally highlight things on certain weeks. That's what we did this last Sunday.
Yeah. I think too, if I'm not mistaken, I'll throw this out there, a tither.
Yeah, come on.
I don't know if avid would be the right word, because admittedly,
I
miss some.
Do you believe in it though?
What do you mean? Do I believe in it? Like,
do you believe in the biblical invitation and command of giving?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. And so I was saying you would. I would say that's avid.
Yeah. I think. Okay, I guess we're going into tithing. I love it. I think for me,
we didn't even warm it up.
Yeah, just gotta. Anyway, I think for me, tithing is just one of the ways that I can be most in line with the heart of God, because it's generosity.
Yeah.
I think to me, this is a Xavier thing, but generosity is the way that I see the Lord the most. Is just like generous, and obviously like you got like love and all this stuff, but I see so much generosity in that, and I feel like that's like how I reflect it, and I feel like I can. That's like my way of showing love is being generous.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way that I would kind of equate.
Yeah.
My level of like I love the Lord, so I'm gonna give it back to Him.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily how it has to be for everyone, but for me that feels like the most.
You did a great job a couple weeks ago when you and your dad were hosting. You kind of led in the tithe. Well, I don't actually remember who led it, but you kind of spoke into it as well, and it was a cool moment of you, just kind of challenging people and speaking into it and reminding us of God's generosity. And I totally agree. Well, we might have to have an episode where we break down.
I like that
Tithes and offerings, and I think it's a valuable thing. And this has got some connection to it, but yesterday. Was beyond just that, for sure when it comes to becoming a missional impact partner and stuff like that.
But the reason I brought up tithing is because I think when you go on there is always an option for mission impact partnership.
Yeah, there is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if as a avid tither,
yeah.
I see that often, and part of what I liked about yesterday is that I never really knew what mission impact partnership was going to when I gave. And to an extent, I still don't necessarily know all of it, but that's what we're here to unpack today, where everything's going and all this kind of stuff. So you talked a little bit about what kind of sparked the wanting to integrate mission impact partnership with the church. But what was my question? I just completely forgot. Like, what is the reason that mission impact partnership is being highlighted, not just this specific Sunday, but being highlighted in the way that you did it yesterday?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do, so Living Water's mission statement is to make disciples who make disciples. And part of what a disciple looks like from how we would break it down is a disciple lives in 5 rhythms of discipleship. One of those rhythms is living in the rhythm of missional impact. And the idea is that basically I am an ambassador of Christ in God's kingdom wherever I go, whenever I go. Like I can make impact with the mission of God, and that is local and global.
Sure.
And so in that, there's the command that Jesus gives to preach the gospel to all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, to go into all the earth and preach the gospel to the ends of the earth. And that idea of people going around the world where the gospel is yet to be preached, or there are unreached groups of people that have not had the opportunity yet to meet Jesus in that way. Like part of missionaries, in large part, it's just like a fulfillment of obedience to that call.
Yeah.
Now it's not just global, it's also right here in our own backyard. But what I recognize is when it comes to people feeling called to go, there are not everyone, and it's evidenced by people feeling called to live in Lacey, Olympia, Washington in this season. Not everyone's called to go.
Yeah.
So if not everyone's called to go like that, there's other opportunities to partner with people who are in praying for them, coming alongside of them in spirit and heart, in financial contribution and support, in encouragement. And so as a church, we recognize our unique opportunity to partner with people called to go around the world and support them both in prayer and in finances, and then have opportunities as well as a church to go on like short-term mission trip opportunities to get some of a taste of what it's like with the kingdom of God stuff around the world. That's not just, what we've maybe gotten used to just in our context. So
So yesterday we kind of highlighted a missionary couple that is no longer missionaries in the sense of like they're no longer overseas, but obviously still by if you can watch yesterday's sermon, it just like I don't know if you'll be able to this magnitude is like if you were there, if you were in the building, but before you got them up on stage, you like had everybody stand who they've had an impact in their life in some way, shape, or form, and it was like almost everybody stood up. Yeah. And so it was the idea that like, sure they're not missionaries overseas anymore, but they're still making a huge impact on the church today. So can you kind of give insight to who they are and why you highlighted them in the way that you did?
Yeah, totally. So yesterday we got to introduce, for those that wouldn't know, and then just highlight Daryl and Diane Wood, who have been a part of Living Water Lacey for almost the whole time we've been here, almost 4 years. Their family has been a part of Living Water. Their son Jason and daughter-in-law Amy, and then their kids, Riley and Cheyenne, have been a part of our church, and Riley and Cheyenne have been in our youth group. So there's a connection with this family. But Daryl and Diane have been missionaries. In fact, they were missionaries for 41 years.
Sheesh.
21 in Indonesia, and then 20 in Belgium.
Wow.
And then before that, they did 9 years of pastoring in missionary pastoring work in remote villages in Alaska. So they've been in ministry for 50 years and have been recently celebrated and honored in that way through their denomination that they've been a part of, through the Assemblies of God, which I've got some background in. Yeah. I feel like you guys do too, right? There's some, maybe not you, but your parents have some AG?
Yeah, I mean, I do too, because my papa is a Assemblies of God pastor, but
that's right.
Like my mom grew up in it.
That's right.
And I was actually I was starting my certification and ordination through them.
Let's go.
I think I'm gonna pivot that, but
let's go.
Yeah.
Let's pivot.
Yeah.
Hey, I love AG though. I've got an Assemblies of God license in there, and it's no longer valid because I'm not a part of Assemblies of God in this season, but the Foursquare guy now. But dude, I love
no beef.
I love my AG.
Yeah.
I love my AG heritage and my AG family.
Yeah, for sure.
All that to say, so they were being honored with their AG Assemblies of God district in Alaska for 50 years of ordained Assemblies of God ministry. And so it was two parts. Why we did yesterday. One is because we have 3 or 4 missional impact Sundays per year to bring to the surface a highlighting of the opportunity we have as a church to partner with men and women, missionaries and ministries locally and globally who are carrying the mission of God in those places, coming alongside, and we can support that in that way. But then secondly, there was something unique with Daryl and Diane that God put in my heart about a year ago when I found out they were about to have 50 years of ministry. And it was just this picture of the honor they were deserved, the honor they deserved. And recognizing as a church family, although they've been technically retired now as missionaries, they've been a part of our church and actively discipling people for the last 4 years, like nobody's business. Like they're like some of our, like I mentioned it yesterday, some of our most effective and engaged and involved disciple makers at Living Water Lacey.
Yeah.
And they're in their 70s and they've been married almost 55 years. And so that there was this moment where I wanted our church to get to be a part of something of honoring. The Bible talks about giving honor where honor is due.
Yeah.
And there was just this moment of like yesterday, Daryl and Diane Wood were due honor.
Yeah.
And we were going to take a significant moment to do that in a way that would honor the Lord, honor them, and really challenge and encourage people to see, like, look at what a faithful, consistent, generous, sacrificial life looks like.
Yeah.
Of 50 plus years of following Jesus and being used by him. So that was kind of the purpose. I wanted to honor, and then I wanted to highlight the opportunity to partner with missionaries.
What do you think is so special about somebody being in ministry for 50 years? Like, why? What's the need? Obviously, that's a long amount of time.
Yeah.
But eventually, you're gonna be 50 years old. Like, let's just say, like, you go down the time frame. Why is it so necessary to point out the 50 years in ministry aspect?
Yeah, just because not a lot of people make it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, straight up, like, there's not a lot of people who make it 5 years.
Yeah.
Let alone where they are at is so astounding in regard to like the percentage, the probability, the rarity that it is for a couple to still be married and still faithfully serving Jesus together and have not thrown the towel in those 50 years, or had some crazy moral failure, or had some crazy, something crazy faith character issue that disqualified them from some form of ministry, who raised children who are having, in grandparent season, and they still love each other and they still love Jesus.
Yeah.
And like that, you think about that and you go, how many people do I know like that?
Yeah.
Like not just know, like I know personally, but like know, like even away,
Yeah.
like away, way, way, way across the country or world
Yeah.
or in YouTube. Like, I don't know you can find on one hand, like less than, 5 fingers, people that you could really put in that box.
Sure.
And that's part of it, was just this real reality of to have that, to reach that milestone and have all of these markers that they have. It just was, it's astounding.
Yeah.
And yet they aren't flashy people.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like they're not like,
I've seen Daryl pop out at fits, okay?
yeah, for that 100%. No, I mean I say flashy, like they both are.
I know what you
know what I mean? They're not like, hey, look at me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that piece too. There's this attractive humility. We talked about humility a couple weeks back on this podcast, but they just are attractive, and they've found a way to continue to have a heart that is, you can tell, is actually enjoying their relationship with Jesus still, and in fact probably enjoying it the most, including and that would I would say bleed into even their marriage.
Sure.
They've said things in the last couple of years I've been around them where they've said this is the most enjoyable season of their marriage that they've ever experienced.
Wow.
It's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy, but you see it.
Yeah.
So I just think I wanted the church to see that highlighted, because in a similar way Paul writes, follow me as I follow Christ. I do think that at times we have a gap between, like, show me the really good quality examples that aren't just on the platforms. They're not just massive followings, platform followings, but they're behind the scenes, or their names are unknown. Yeah. But their life actually backs it up all the way, and it's proven that for 50 years. Yeah. I mean, that's just so rare.
How do you think, so neither one of us are close to 50 years.
Yeah, but I appreciate you said that, because you're right. I'm not.
I feel like you're less than halfway.
Careful, dude.
No, I was going to say, I feel like you're less than halfway there. Like, are you?
Less than halfway? No, I'm more than halfway.
You are?
Yeah, bro.
Dang, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just turned 34, dude. So I'm 16 years away.
Whoa. Okay.
Dude, that made me feel so old, even just saying it. No, 16 years.
There was no.
I'm 2/3 of the way, basically.
Crazy.
I'm just over 2/3 of the way there.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, well.
Just unbelievable to think about.
That's still a relatively long way away in the grand scheme of things. I mean, maybe not in the scheme of eternity, but like you're. Yeah. Anyway, how do you think that we get there? So even for somebody like me, like you've been doing this for how long again?
I mean, I'm 34, and I've been in full-time ministry since I was 20.
Okay.
So 14 years.
Yeah. So I've
got 30.
Started.
I've got 36 more years of full-time ministry left before I hit 50, and then I because I was Assemblies of God for a little bit, and now I've been Foursquare for the last 7 years. My numbers don't fully add up there, but let's say we're at 12 or 13 years of credentialed ministry. Yeah, I still got a long ways for that.
Okay, so how do you think you even get there? Because there's this level of, like, for me, there's a level of confidence, like, oh yeah, I've got this. But then I look back, and I've only really been doing this, and I haven't even stepped into full-time ministry. I mean, I did an internship, but I don't know. Yeah. I haven't stepped into full-time ministry to a capacity like that yet, or if the Lord wills yet. Yeah. But I think about so many times just in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been a follower of Jesus, where I'm like, dang, I fell short, like, bad. Yeah. And I don't know if I got 50 years in me. Yeah. So what do you think? Obviously, they're not here to answer this, but what do you think is a part of their success in it? Yeah,
it's a great question. I think that kind of question is the most important kind of question that a younger person should be asking, because it's it shows the awareness that like they've got something that I want, and I want to, the value of what, here's maybe a better way that I would say it. The 50 years is awesome. The fact that they still love Jesus and they love him in a way that you can tell it's real.
Right.
After being in ministry for 50 years, maybe that's even more of like the thing that's impressive is ministry didn't destroy them.
For sure.
Or they didn't get bitter at God or like whatever. I mean, I'm sure there were, I know there were hard times where I'm sure they felt those things, but like by and large, on the other side of 50 years of vocational ministry, these guys are still pouring their guts out for ministry and loving Jesus. And like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
so,
no, it is.
So how do you, I think the question of how do you get there, I think partly there's probably a lot of, answers that would be relevant for this, but here's what I see. You can tell that they both have genuinely remained humble and teachable.
Yeah.
Like they have sought out people in their lives who they know will help them along the way. And I think, how do you get there? You have to surround yourself with people who are genuinely loving Jesus and following him, and not just doing it for their own whatever.
Yeah. I want to pause there for a second, not to interrupt, but to kind of put an emphasis on something, because this is probably I'm going to say you've thrown this out there double-digit times of getting surrounded by people.
Yeah.
I feel like I've asked this question before, but I feel like I need to ask it again of like, what's so important about that?
Yeah.
Being in a community of some sort.
Yeah. I mean, it's both within the small context of like your close circle and a larger community. Like I look at the way that Jesus is, while we see those 3.5 years of ministry, like the way he kind of unofficially had a framework of relationship. He had his inner circle of 3, and then he had the disciples, and then he had, probably somewhere in that like 40 to 120 people that were like kind of on the peripheral. They would always kind of be hanging around with when he would be doing, parable moments or right before or after a miracle. So like that kind of group, you kind of break it down. You've got like your couple, 2 or 3 closer dudes, like that you're like, they know me inside and out. Yeah. And they're going to challenge me. They're going to love me. But like, if you've got to find a couple of those gals, for the gals out there that like aren't afraid to challenge you, call you out, but they love you, and then I think you've got a group of like people you're doing more life with. So like I'll just take your life for an example. I don't know your inner circle of 3, but I know you've got a couple of those dudes. You've had them over the years for sure that are there. And then you expand that out, 10, 12, 15 people. I mean, it's kind of like, I would say people you're doing ministry with, people on worship teams, and, people that you've been a part of internships with, and so forth. And then that larger group of like 40 to 100 is church, like at least in our context. Like you come in, you all kind of, there's your community in that large part. But so Jesus's model is pretty amazing. And then yet he still does his like, love y'all, but I'm going to go get alone with the Father, and that's just an incredible prescription all around.
And that's what I feel like too. I think about so far my quote unquote success in following Jesus has literally been that, like, community and then alone time. Yeah. And I now that this is kind of getting wrapped up in some biblical context, it makes so much sense because Jesus did the exact same thing. Yeah. He was in community and then he was alone. Yeah. And not to say that, well, definitely to say one is greater than the other. Like, you need to be alone with God. Yeah. And I've sensed this more and more as I've gotten more and more alone with God, is that honestly the community becomes more and more important to me. Totally. As I get alone with God, because I realize the value of each and every person and how he sees them. And then I think too, there's just a level of like, if God is the one showing me who I am, I don't need them to show me who I am. And since God is the one showing me who I am, I can come here and I can actually be a light in some sense to maybe people who don't consistently have that alone time with him. Totally. But they also need to hear a sense of like, how does God see me? Totally. And there's another component to the community piece. Sometimes I don't hear God.
statement.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know if I'm hearing him accurately.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the value and the importance of having that community is because they will remind you of who you are.
Yeah.
And when you forget, or when you're struggling, or when because like you can still go and struggle and get with the Lord, but there are times when like and biblically, like having going to the elders for prayer, for healing,
Mm-hmm.
just different things where you see
Yeah.
throughout the New Testament church, especially like the value of like you got to pray together. You can't
Yeah.
just pray alone because
sure.
it's part of the way that God has designed it. So sometimes it's going to be reminded of like who you are, or you're acting out in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and you got community to be like, yo, you're not acting like yourself,
Yeah.
who we know you are.
Yeah.
That you need to help shape you and
Mm-hmm.
reinforce who God's called you to be. Yeah, I mean, the whole cliche of show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yeah.
Right? Like that idea.
Yeah. There's definitely some real life. Is merit the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Real life merit to that.
Yeah.
So in this special service
Yeah.
of like honoring 50 years, what was your favorite part of it?
Oh man. There's a few parts. A few parts I really enjoyed. I think one of the my favorite parts was definitely the way that the moment of Jason, their son, who came up towards the end, and I asked him to come and just share something about them and the impact that they have had, because what people got to see in that moment, even, and what he said was awesome, but more than what he said was the picture that they got to see, which was a son who wanted to be here because of his love and his honor for his parents, and it wasn't obligated. It wasn't out of the fear of letting him down. It was out of a pure, genuine desire. And like, again, when I look at life, when I look at what matters in this whole thing, like you could 50 years of ministry, awesome. But if you've got all of that and your family on the internal side of things wants nothing to do with you.
Sure.
Now, again, I know there are factors that are there's so many different layers to that, right? Like there's a lot of factors that are out of people's control, and it's not always a matter of like how people do it or not. But by and large, like there is this piece of getting to see their adult son with his kids in the back who have loved their grandparents, and you go, man. In all of the ministry things, the miracles, the crazy stuff, like God moved, people saved, people discipled, people they've poured into, they're standing here in this time of their life, in this later season, and they've got the thing that also I think is important for people to see matters, the first ministry, their marriage and their kids and their grandkids. I think that was the moment. Like I think because of the visual of it too. Yeah. And just knowing them, that it was probably my favorite.
I didn't get to hear what he was saying because I came back up to play piano.
Yeah.
But I looked up for a little bit and I saw Alejandro crying, and so I was like, "Dude, what is going on right now?" Yeah. But I looked over, and there was just like everybody was locked in that moment. Yeah. And it was pretty cool to see. I'm gonna answer my own question. I think my favorite part of the service yesterday was hearing not just like their stories, but like the times where, because you hear missionary stories all the time of like amazing stuff that was happening, and not to take anything away from that. Sure. But I think one of the things that was most impactful to me was how they responded in the times where everything wasn't amazing. Yeah. Like they talked about their kids having tuberculosis and how it was like prayer that got them through, and literally nothing else than prayer and seeing God move in that way. And so I think that was really encouraging to me as somebody who does want to do this the right way, and can have this foresight of like, oh, as soon as I get past this season, everything's gonna be okay. Yeah. And not to say that that's not true, but it is true to an extent of like, totally, God's got it, and all I want to do is be a part of His plan. Yeah. Like that's it. Yeah. If I have this foresight and my foresight is opposite of what God has, I would much rather that be wrong than to like follow that and just be wrong.
Totally.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
And she made a comment like that around when she felt called, like God had called her. And you'll have to remind me. Maybe you can help me remember exactly what she said, 'cause I'm forgetting now. But she basically said, I'd rather like obey and be wrong than like not obey and regret.
Yeah.
You know, that idea.
Yeah.
Man, I just wonder how many people are missing that in their own life right now.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe the Lord would remind you, even if you're listening today, to like obey, even if you don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's a better route it's better to fail and lean that way than it is to go that other way.
Yeah, and what she said too was like the Lord honors faith.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing in faith, even though it may be wrong.
Yeah.
I think he just looks at us like little kids.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, oh, my son messed up. I'm gonna. Maybe I don't necessarily want to have to fix every mistake, but mistakes is how he's gonna learn.
Yeah.
Or how she's.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that in my human lens of a dad too, who like, you know, with my kids that if my son attempted to obey something he thought I was saying or I had asked him to do, because there are a lot of times where there's not even an attempt, right? We all get that. Like, there's just straight up just like, nah.
Especially, I know your kids, so I know that's a reality.
Yeah. And that is I mean, just the human lens of like, there's just such a different posture of like when you see them attempt, but it doesn't necessarily land, or they didn't do what I actually said, but they tried.
Yeah.
And you just, your heart is just like, that is almost even, you know, just as valuable because of your willingness, faith, you know, that kind of, so.
I think about it too from like, I've heard this so many times from coaches, it's like ridiculous, and it's always the exact same thing. They'll say, I'd rather you go 100 miles an hour backwards than to take one wrong step forward, or to take a lazy step forward or something like that. And it's like super eye-opening, because I remember hearing like my dad say that, and just be like a little kid and be like, why would I want to do what's wrong, what's right, slower? Like, why would I not want to go slow and do what's right than to like go all in and just be wrong?
Yeah.
But it makes so much sense now, because if you're going to miss something if you're moving slow. Yeah. At least let your mistakes propel you towards where it's right.
And I think it's that hesitation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't hesitate or delay in obedience, because even if you don't fully have it, like God will honor the heart motive in that space. So, yeah.
Dude,
you're good. You're good.
Again.
We're probably close to. Yeah, we're probably close to. I mean, maybe one or two more.
Yeah. So you mentioned this kind of at the beginning, this idea that not everybody is a missionary or like supposed to go out into another country and do all this kind of stuff, but we all have a mission in a sense. So what do you think is some ways that we can be faithful in our mission as we, let's say, go into work? And I feel like I've asked similar questions to this before, but
but it is. It's a good question to challenge us with the reality. And that's the thing that I constantly wrestle with in my own life. And the thing I see within the church too, like not just our church, but the church, is that it does appear at times as if people live out their Christianity with like these different categories of Christian when it comes to this world. Like, I'm not talking about just like giftings and callings. I'm talking about just base level. Like, I think there's some people who believe they've subscribed to a Christianity that is a convenient Christianity within the context of their own schedule in life. And then there are those that just like, they're just kind of, they go to the next level and that's just them. But that's, the reality is like, there's no like, that's not it. Like, you go to New Testament church, and there wasn't this category of like nominal Christian and follower and then like hardcore missionary. It was just, you got changed by Jesus, and that was enough to change your entire life and direction in a way that was like, I want to tell as many people as I possibly can about this. So at some point, you know, the human condition still impacts that and I think slows that down. But I think everybody needs to live and think like a missionary, even living in their own domestic, stateside, you know, comfy convenience of life. Because if you think for a second, I mean, because we are all aliens in this world. This is not our home. We are all like passer passing by, right? This is not the eternal place of destination. It's temporary. So with that, like when you live with a missionary mindset, like it shifts everything. You don't hold everything as tightly, because you recognize it's not going to last forever. You're not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
But again, back to that word reality. There's a lot of that in thought, but for some reason, we do not really embrace that in the reality of our life.
Yeah.
Where it is evidenced.
Yeah.
Like clearly, and so I do think there are people called to be missionaries to different people, groups, places, etc. And I do think that's the ends of the earth kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I do not think that means that we that aren't called to different places should be living any less like a missionary.
Yeah, I get that. And I want to like extend this challenge.
Yeah.
Because I agree that not everybody is called to be a missionary, like, at all.
Yeah.
Like, that's definitely not.
Right.
I don't think that's what the Great Commission is attempting to say. But I do think that everybody should go on a mission trip.
Oh, 100%.
And I say that so passionately because I've been on 2, and the first one that I went on was like, I had this such narrow mind of what it meant to rely on God. And when I went on that mission trip, I was like, dude, I could like never see God's hand move again and be okay.
Yeah.
In a sense of like, it says like, don't be anxious about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear because God will provide. But I've never had to like live that.
Yeah.
Because it's always been okay. And maybe to an extent that is the provision of God. Not maybe that is
Sure.
the provision of God. But it doesn't look the same across the board. And when I went to a place in Mexico, I was like mind blown at like the reality of that verse.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that there was that's what Jesus was talking about, of like, you might not have a job in America. That might be okay because we've got stuff like unemployment and stuff like that. But you go to another country and there's people like making jobs out of their houses of like selling food, and their house is like the size of like your bathroom.
Right.
And it's just like, what in the world?
Yeah.
So that's my challenge for the people watching, is to just like experience that, like go on a mission trip, and then also support the people that are doing that and living in these places.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a great challenge, and yeah, I mean, I think everybody should experience global missions in some way. To what you just said, I think there's a dependency at times that we don't recognize we actually need to have on the Lord.
Yeah.
Like we can experience and do experience oftentimes when we're overseas or we're, on foreign land for doing missions. You recognize how dependent you are on yourself. But you recognize how much you just rely on your own day to day, and like God is. I mean, like the best example of it is like I think Corrie ten Boom was the one that coined this phrase or this metaphor around prayer being, is prayer your steering wheel or your spare tire, and how prayer needs to be your steering wheel, not your spare tire. I think in a similar way, the picture of like, I think you realize how when you're on a missions field, like, you don't have the option for God to not be your driving, your steering wheel.
You're right.
Right. But when you're not in that environment, oftentimes we experience God like He's a spare tire. Like when absolute emergency, when I'm not able to do this on my own, God, where are you at? I need you. Healing, provision, wisdom, missions field. Like that's the first option, and oftentimes only option. To go anywhere and do anything. And so I think that's helpful for us at times to be thrust out of our zones of context and comfort, to be able to experience God in that way, because it does open your eyes to coming back, into your normal day to day, and yet we still wrestle with and are tempted to go back into a place of comfort and convenience. And again, a part of that is why being in and around community, I think, is still so vital for us to be disciples who make disciples that don't become ineffective or lukewarm. But yeah, I think, but thinking about there was one other thing about this idea of missions that I just want to challenge people with when it comes to the partnership side. Two things. One, you never know when God might call you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I had this thought recently. Like I know we're called here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're called to pastor in the season, Living Water, Lacey, or just to be pastors to the community of Lacey, Olympia, right. And it's through the vehicle of Living Water and Living Water, Lacey at this stage. But like, I should not live in the posture that like God could never call us and my family to be missionaries in a foreign country. Mm-hmm. And if he did, like let's say he called you tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, we're in different contexts of seasons and stuff, and obviously like you mentioned earlier, I'm almost 50, so there's a different level of age gap there. But like let's say God, you got a phone call from God tonight and he's like, I'm calling you to Rwanda tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Whole family, whole life, go. How much would you have to sell in order to be freed up to do that? How much of your life would have to be figured out because of all of the different things or like commitments or whatever? Like how full is your life with things that don't matter that would be in the way of your yes to that? If God was really in that, right? Yeah. And I think that is a good filter because I was like the way I was thinking about it with the Lord is like if God did that, like how easy would it be for me to respond with a yes and actually do it? Yeah. Not just like easy for me to say yes because like it'd be hard for me to go because I didn't want to or whatever, but like practically, like what am I bound by? Yeah. And I think if Americans especially, but people within our church context considered, how ready am I if God does call me? I think it's important to be ready, right? Yeah. Because if we live like that, you know, you just never know. Yeah. And man, if I can encourage people, here's how I see it. There are two different layers of this when it comes to giving financially. There's tithes and there's offerings. Yeah. And the tithes part of a tenth of the income that you receive or you make in some way, giving it back to the Lord, it's all His. He lets you keep 90%, but that 10% to your local church community and you know storehouse, if you will, as that baseline. I'm a firm believer in that, and I have been since before I ever was a pastor. Likewise. I mean, right. God is whether or not you go Old Testament, New Testament. I think New Testament argues that when it comes to tithe, that it's not necessarily the end goal. I think the New Testament really pivots it to be like like the floor. Yeah, like a priority. Yeah, like it's like like yes, Old Testament is where we get our theology of tithing, but then like when it gets to the New Testament, like Jesus is like, give everything you have, and everybody's like, whoa, we were just tripping out on 10%. He's like, well, you know, I just think like so. New Testament flips it. Yeah, Jesus is like, let that be the floor, and we, you know, there's more. Bottom line, here's about us just having our hands open to whatever it is to be able to offer the Lord with all of it and trusting He's our provision. But that tithes and then the offerings part, the extra above and beyond what God has asked us to give through tithes is part of this opportunity to give and partner with people with missional impact partnership. Yeah. And I just want people I want them to hear from the Lord, but I also want them to get excited about the idea that like when you say yes to that, you're a part of something that is happening that is literally global. Like as you support somebody through missional impact partnerships, like my friends Jordan and Vanessa Bina in France, who are pastoring an international church in Grenoble, France, and God's opened up a door for them to have a coffee shop in the heart of downtown Grenoble that has become a house of prayer multiple days a week. They house ministry events there, but then it's just become this place of outreach throughout the week where young professionals and different people from international places are coming to this coffee shop and they're going to experience God's presence. They don't do that unless there are people over here that are like, I can't go do that right now, but man, I want to support them. Yeah. You know, and so if they need $5,000 to pay for their yearly cost of coffee stuff, like I don't have $5,000, but man, I could sacrifice like like a coffee a month. Like,
Yeah.
let's say coffee's like $7.50 now,
Yeah.
a cup of coffee. I could
Ridiculous.
send $7.50 a month, you know, to just say, hey, like, I don't even know if that's a drop in the bucket, and it actually is.
Yeah.
But I just want to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's my desire.
Yeah.
I just want people to go, like, it's not about the amount, it's about the amount of participation that our whole church could go, I want to be a part of that, because I want to be a part of kingdom missional impact around the world, and, you know, right here in my own backyard. So I mean, that's the gist. That was like the gist of yesterday.
Days about it.
I'm pumped about it, dude.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I think the mission impact partnership does go far beyond just 3 Sundays of a year. And I think if we as a body could understand that, and impact more bodies to understand that and become the body of Christ, and that we would understand that as an entire body. I think we would see the world flipped upside down pretty quick.
Yeah, big time.
And that's just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I agree.
But would you like to close us out in prayer?
Yeah.
I did it last week with Kyle.
Yeah, dude, I'd be honored. And celebrating, man, episode 10.
Yeah, let's go.
Way to go, bro.
Let's go.
He's been an amazing host, right? I mean, we gotta shout it out. Great job. I'm really grateful. But yeah, let's pray. God, we love you. Thank you for the conversation today. Thank you for the opportunity on Sunday to honor and celebrate Daryl and Diane Wood and 50 years of ministry. And beyond that, God, just two people who are just reflections of you. God, people see you more clearly when they see Daryl and Diane. I want that in my life. I want that in our church, whether it's with a family, my family, whether it's with strangers around the world in some missions trip. God, would you be glorified? And would your mission of reaching lost and broken and hurting people with the hope that you're the Savior of the world. God, would that continue to go forth and through us as a church family, and those that would be listening, would it encourage and challenge them as we step into who you've called us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You guys, thank you for watching. Make sure you leave a like, leave a comment down below.
Boom.
And subscribe.
Come on.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye. Let's go.